This is actually going to be an update to one of our videos that is in our playlist on the channel called Funeral Home Foolery. So you guys can check that out. So maybe you can catch up a little bit about how we got to this point. But this is actually going to be a final update in this story. And I'm going to tell you, the details might shock you to the core because you'd be thinking like, why would a human person do something like this? How can you be this demented? So you will get some of the details, but we're definitely going to talk about the final sentencing in this case. But before we get there, let me give you a disclaimer. Some viewers may find the following content offensive and controversial. The information in this video comes from multiple sources, including court records, official police charges, news web articles, and interviews. This video commentary also contains my personal opinions about the facts of this story. The point is to use this story as a cautionary tale in hopes of preventing tragedies like these to children going forward. Viewer discretion is advised. That is your official disclaimer. Now, again, as a reminder, I did an update, or this is an update, but I did the story originally a while ago, but you have to go on the channel and check the video, watch it. I think what we talked about initially was needless to say. It was intriguing. It was disgusting. It was just everything in one. But Sunset Mesa Funeral Home operators have been sentenced to federal prison for illegal body parts scheme. And I'm getting this information from justice.gov. So if you want to argue with the details, go argue with justice.gov because that is a government website. Go argue with your government. I want you guys to take a look at these nasty ass women. Listen to what they did. The United States Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado announced today that the operators of Sunset Mesa Funeral Home in Montrose, Colorado, were sentenced to federal prison for illegally selling body parts. Ladies and gentlemen, these were dead bodies, dead people, deceased. They were dismembering, chopping the bodies up, separating the limbs, whatever you want to call it. And you'd have to ask, who were you selling this shit to? Who was, let alone the fact that you were willing to do it and desecrate dead remains of family members and people in an undignified way. Who's buying them? You might get mad at the person providing the product, but you won't get mad about the people who are purchasing the product, providing the market. Oh, they were selling body parts illegally or entire bodies without the consent of family members of the deceased. Brace yourselves for this. Megan Hess, that fat turd that was on the right-hand side of my screen right there. Megan Hess, age 46 years old. Why that woman looks like she's a good 60. Was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison after earlier pleading guilty to one count of mail fraud and aiding and abetting. According to a plea agreement from 2010 through 2018, the defendant and others stole the bodies or body parts of hundreds of victims, then sold the remains to victims purchasing the remains for body broker services. How does that even exist? Under the auspices of Sunset Mesa Funeral Directors, the defendant will frequently meet with the victims seeking cremation services for themselves or their loved ones who have died. During those meetings, the defendant and others would represent to the victims that Sunset Mesa Funeral Directors would cremate the descendants and provide their cremated remains back to the families. But of course, that's how we get here. They weren't doing that. So they were just scooping up some fake ashes and just giving people random shit. And then taking the bodies and doing something completely different with it. That turns my stomach just thinking about it. Instead, the defendant and others would harvest body parts from or prepare the entire bodies of the descendants for sale in broker and body broker services. Shirley Koch, age 69 years old, which was that other hag that y'all saw on the other side of the screen. Let me get her picture back up here, which would be that one over there, looking like the Grim Reaper over there on the right-hand side. 69 years old. 69 years old, was sentenced to 15 years in prison after earlier pleading guilty to one count of mail fraud and aiding and abetting. According to a plea agreement from 2010 to 2018, Shirley Koch was involved in meeting with families seeking cremation services for their loved ones who had died. In many instances, Koch and Hess neither discussed nor obtained authorization for donation of descendants' bodies or body parts for body broker services. In other instances, the topic of donation was raised by Hess or Koch and specifically rejected by the families. So they told them no and hell no. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. In such circumstances, despite lacking any authorization, Koch and Hess removed body parts from or otherwise prepared entire bodies of hundreds of descendants for body broker services. In a few instances where family members agreed to donation, Hess and Koch sold the remains of the descendants beyond what was authorized. So they went above and beyond. They went beyond what was authorized by the family, which was often limited to tissue samples, tumors, or portions of skin. Hess and Koch also delivered cremains to families with the representation that the cremains were that of the deceased, when frequently that was not the case. According to a plea agreement, Hess and Koch would also ship bodies and body parts that tested positive for or belonging to people who have died from infectious diseases, including hepatitis B and C and HIV, after certifying to buyers that the remains were disease-free. 20 years in prison to me, federal prison, sounds about right to me. What do y'all think? Y'all think that's about right? I think they got it right. 20 years in the feds. These shipments would be through the mail or on commercial air flights in violation of the Department of Transportation regulations regarding the transportation of hazardous materials. They could have been shipping hepatitis and HIV all over the goddamn country, man. Judge Christine M. Arguello sentenced Hess and Koch on January 3rd of 2023. That was 2 days ago from today, depending on when you're watching this video. The defendant's conduct was horrific and morbid and driven by greed. They took advantage of numerous victims who were at their lowest point given the recent loss of a loved one. We hope these prison sentences will bring the victims' family members some amount of peace as they move forward in the grieving process, U.S. Attorney Cole Figwin said. Excuse me. We sincerely hope that this punishment deters like-minded fraudsters in the future. These two women preyed on vulnerable victims who turned them in a life of grief and sadness. But instead of offering guidance, these greedy women betrayed the trust of hundreds of victims and mutilated their loved ones, said the FBI Denver acting special agent in charge, Leonard Corallo. That is a long title, bro. Without knowledge or consent, the women disrespected the wishes of the grieving victims and degraded the bodies of their family members to sell them for profit. These two criminals continued in their atrocities for years, showing no remorse or contrition even after they were exposed. Nothing can guarantee solace for the victims or repair the damage done, but perhaps this sentence can mark the end of a horrible chapter in their lives. I don't know if I need to read the rest of this. Here's what I can tell you from what I remember about this case. That woman that you see right there, and a lot of times would take the money that she would earn and she went to Disney World or Disneyland, one of the two. Go back and watch my previous video. She went to Disneyland like a big ass stupid child. Let me give you guys fair usage. It was either Disney World or Disneyland, one or the other. Federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without the authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use. It is allowed for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe of copyright under 17 U.S.C. 107. I just don't really know what's appropriate. To me in my head, 20 years sounds about right. They're probably not going to survive that long, especially that one that got 15 years that was, what was she, like 69 years old? But nonetheless, if you guys would do me a favor and please click that thumbs up. This is going to be on our series of funeral home foolery in our playlist, so you can go back and watch those other videos in there. Check that series out. It's actually pretty interesting. I'm going to let you hear from one of the family. No. I'm going to let you hear from some of the family members. I'm going to skip through some of this.
It's worse than his death, to be truthful.
The accusations are disturbing. Families victimized during some of their most vulnerable moments.
They really can't have feelings, or they couldn't be in the back room of a funeral home sawing up bodies.
Tonight, claims of
or conscience.
Secretly dismembering and selling body parts in the hours after a death.
The FBI is talking to people. We're talking to people. They say you betrayed their trust to make money, to sell body parts.
Tonight, a funeral home owner and her parents now under investigation by the FBI.
We have a heart-wrenching top story for you tonight, but a warning, it does deal with a disturbing topic.
Tonight, a Colorado Springs widow is reacting to the news that a funeral home operator accused of illegally selling her husband's body parts has pleaded guilty in federal court.
That guilty plea wasn't for body brokering, it's for mail fraud. KRDO News Channel 13's Mallory Anderson is live in studio with the new developments. And Mallory, this has been a long legal process for a lot of grieving families.
Bart, Heather, it's been 4 years since Danielle McCarthy got a call from the FBI saying the Sunset Mesa Funeral Home in Montrose had dismembered her husband and sold his body parts. But as this case inches closer to a conclusion, McCarthy is opening up about why she feels justice will never be served.
There's no words to describe. That was my husband of 25 years. And finding out what had happened, that he had been dismembered and sold as multiple body parts, there are no words to describe what that feels like.
Danielle McCarthy says the trauma inflicted upon her and her family by Sunset Mesa Funeral Home is one she continues to confront every day. The business owner, Megan Hess, and her mother, Shirley Koch, were arrested in 2020. According to an FBI investigation, the duo was selling those body parts in instances when loved ones requested a cremation.
Who does such a vile, dastardly, despicable thing at a person's most vulnerable time and at a most sacred time?
Hess and Koch have been charged with 6 counts of mail fraud and 3 counts of illegal transportation of hazardous materials. On Tuesday, Hess pleaded guilty to the mail fraud charges under a deal that the other charges be dropped.
It's a very generous plea that has been offered. It's definitely not, I think, anything that the victim pool would have wanted. I understand why and how the plea was offered and why it was just the 1 count. But at the same time, I don't think there's justice to be found because you can't undo what's been done to families.
McCarthy says the entire legal case has made the grieving process even harder, especially since her husband's remains have still not been laid to rest. Right now, his dismembered body parts remain in an FBI evidence refrigerator.
That has been my biggest struggle, is kind of not knowing when I would get him back, because as a Gold Star family, he has the right and needs to be interred in a national cemetery. Haven't been able to do that and have met many doors because we didn't have his body to inter. So that's been a big struggle as well. So not having a place to mourn, knowing I don't have him, and then you triple that with the knowledge of how he was dismembered. Very, very traumatic.
And we begin tonight with a huge court case. The mother and daughter behind the Sunset Mesa Funeral Home body broker scandal, Shirley Koch and Megan Hess, appeared in court for sentencing today. Our Michael Lagerwell joins us live outside the federal court building here in Grand Junction with the latest details. Michael, what can you tell us?
Rob, victims were lining up as early as 6 a.m. this morning outside the federal courthouse to secure their seat in the Hess and Koch's sentencing hearing, a hearing that could net them a maximum of 20 years. Now, right now, the court is still hearing closing arguments. However, earlier today, I caught up with victims and their supporters.
Today means for us, the justice is finally going to take place today.
Maria told me Sunset Mesa Funeral Home sold her brother to a plastination lab, and he's just one of the confirmed 222 victims of Megan Hess and Shirley Koch. But the federal government estimates there may be another 338 likely victims they have not been able to confirm. Government prosecutors say victim funeral expenses and Sunset Mesa's profits on this grisly trade total $1,254,293.90. For that, they say the mother and daughter should pay.
It's what we're hoping, that she gets the maximum.
Maria is not alone in her sentiment. Almost every victim who took the stand today asked Judge Argrello to sentence both Hess and Koch to the maximum.
Ultimately, I hope Megan Hess and Shirley Koch go to prison for 20 years, the maximum sentence.
Representative Matt Soper appeared in court to show his continued support for the victims. On the stand, dozens of victims told personal horror stories, nightmares, riddled with guilt, blaming themselves for not doing enough to keep their loved ones from this horrible fate.
But when I got the news that the ashes I had was not my brother's remains, cremains, to me that day was like he died all over again.
3 hours of victim after victim, reliving the pain and suffering they said Hess and Koch's actions caused them. Many condemn Hess and Koch, saying they took advantage of their trust and loved ones for money.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what we actually call hashtag bodies for benefits. Oh man, this is just sick and sad in so many different ways. I think that 20 years to me sounds appropriate. There's really no appropriate punishment for this. You know, you can't, you know, I mean, it really wouldn't make sense to charge them for each individual human that they desecrated like this and sold off. But I think they need to get every person that was tied to this business, because it's been going on for a long time. But for now, this is one small victory, one small battle that was won in a big, huge war of this thing that everybody is going to have to deal with that at some point with a family member, a friend, a loved one, when it comes to dealing with these undertakers and funeral homes. Just pray that you find the right one, I guess, man. Just because you really don't know what they back there doing like that. You know, you really can't allow the public to be back there for a lot of different reasons. Just, I don't know. But these people are absolutely sick, and you just hope that this don't happen to you or your family or friends, man. But anyway, keep the family in your prayers. This is a decent conclusion to the story. I think I'm pretty happy. Let me know what you guys think. From my heart to yours, I love you all. Take care of yourself. Love yourselves. Love your kids. Guys, have a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you later, all right? Peace.